A girl who's dreamed her whole life of becoming a princess wakes up one day to find out she actually is one. That sounds like the simplest, softest wish fulfillment fantasy television can offer. It isn't. The real reason she was taken from her family in the first place is one of the darkest backstories hiding underneath a fun premise in this entire genre. Here's a fair complaint about secret princess shows in general. They can feel weightless. Ordinary girl discovers she's secretly royal, gets handed a palace, a wardrobe, and a prince, and it's easy to watch that kind of premise and feel like you're being sold pure candy with nothing underneath it. No real stakes, no real cost, just a fantasy for the sake of a fantasy. Dekha Ek Khwaab sets up exactly that premise on the surface. Manya is a 19-year-old girl from a poor background who spends her days wishing she could live a life of royalty and luxury. And then almost overnight, she learns she actually is Rajkumari Manyata, the long-lost crown princess of Devgar. If you stopped right there, you'd have every reason to expect a completely disposable fantasy with nothing real underneath it. But the how behind her disappearance is where this show stops being disposable. Once you know why she was taken from her family in the first place, the entire premise reads completely differently. Here's the insight. Manya's kidnapping isn't random and it isn't magical. She was taken by Murari Lal, a poor watchman, as calculated revenge, because her own father, Maharaj Brijraj Singh, killed Murari's wife and children in a drunk driving accident. This isn't a fairy tale mishap. It's a man who lost everything, taking the one thing he could from the man who destroyed his family. That single detail changes everything about how you're supposed to watch this show. Monia's entire childhood, every year she spent poor and unaware of her real identity, exists because of a real crime her own father committed. The princess fantasy premise is actually sitting on top of a story about collateral damage and grief. Let's break down how that plays out across the rest of the show. 1. The setup earns its irony instead of just stating it. Before the reveal, the show spends real time on Monya's ordinary life. A girl from a modest background who genuinely, sincerely wishes to be a princess, with no idea how close that wish already is to being true. That dramatic irony only works because her longing feels real first. If the show rushed past her ordinary life, the eventual reveal wouldn't hit nearly as hard. 2. The kidnapping motive is the single element that elevates the entire show. Murari Lal isn't a cartoonish villain who steals a baby for no reason. He's a man whose wife and children were killed by Brijraj's reckless drunk driving, and taking Manyata was his version of justice, or at least his version of making the man who ruined his life feel lost too. That backstory means every scene of Murari raising Monya afterward, the poor watchman who becomes her adoptive father figure, carries genuine emotional complexity instead of being a simple crime to be punished. 3. The romance shifts from commoner fantasy to complex royal clash. At first, Manya clings to her commoner past and falls for Akash, rejecting her royal betrothal to Yuvraj Udayveer Singh. But the show subverts expectations when Akash turns dark, returning to seek vengeance against both royal families. Instead of the predictable princess leaves royalty for commoner trope, Manyata finds true love where she least expected it. In Udayveer, the very prince she originally resisted, that slow-burn transformation of their relationship from forced duty to genuine love gives the romantic arc far more weight than standard fairy tales. 4. Jainandini's rivalry escalates into real thriller territory. Manyata's rival, her own sister Jainandini, doesn't stop at petty jealousy. The show escalates into an actual attempted murder plotline, including a confrontation that leaves Akash falling from a cliff and a blackmail scheme built around video evidence of the fight. That's a significant jump in stakes from typical sibling rivalry drama, and it's what keeps the back half of the show from coasting purely on the romance. 5. The succession trial makes her win feel earned, not just inherited. Rather than simply handing Manyata the crown by birthright, the show has the royal priest set 3 grueling tests to determine which sister should be named heir. Manyata has to actually prove herself against Jainandini's sabotage to become the 21st heiress of Devgar. That structural choice matters. It means the fantasy ending isn't just about being born into the right family. It's about earning the position despite everything working against her. If you like when a show's surface-level premise turns out to be hiding something much heavier underneath, that's exactly the kind of thing this channel keeps digging into.